Come on and wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. I stepped in the water, and the water was cold. God's gonna trouble the water. It chilled this old body, but it didn't harm my soul. God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade in the water. Wade in the water, children.
Who are these strangers standing on a bridge in odd costumes? Where are they going? What will they find? They call themselves Mississippi June bugs. What is a Mississippi June bug?
If you don't believe I've been redeemed, God's gonna trouble the water. Follow me down to that Jordan stream. God's gonna trouble the water.
The definition of what a June bug is still being written. It's a work in progress, because the people that call themselves June bugs they may be seen to the public as a lawyer or a judge or a physician, a writer, a college professor, a ne'er-do-well, a planter, a business owner. And I think if you think of yourself as a June bug, then that's enough to be one.
Judge Mills, in putting together the June Bug Society, is endeavoring to elevate the erudition of Mississippians, and ideally everyone involved should be doing a research project and learning about the subject, because it's a rare opportunity to say we're going to study what it means to be a Mississippian and what inhabiting what Faulkner would have called this postage stamp of soil means.
Well, they're interesting people. I mean, there's something to be interested in. Why I am a member of the June Bug Society is a mystery to me, because if you've talked to them, and you've interviewed people today, so you know these are really talented writers and thinkers and musicians, and I really was thinking about, so why did they ask me? And I was reading something this morning before I got a car to come down here, and it was about June bugs, and it said a June bug has 2 sets of wings and it still can't fly very well. So I said, well, that's why I'm in it. I am the 2 sets of wings that really can't do any of it very well, but they need somebody to fill that role, so that's who I am.
There are no qualifications to be a June bug. There are no requirements of membership. There are no dues. It's a group of like-minded people who like to interact and talk about and write about history and literature and music in a fresh way, in a challenging way that intrigues others and encourages this back and forth discourse, and just contemplates the power and the glory of life.
In 2019, the Mississippi June bugs flew and drove and rode trains to Boston, Massachusetts to locate a plaque memorializing Quentin Compson, a young Mississippian from William Faulkner's Sound and the Fury and Absalom, who went to Harvard and jumped off the Charles River Bridge, taking his own life on June the 2nd, 1910. Some of the June bugs rode the train following the same route Quentin took to Boston. Many would be surprised at what they would learn. And I'm here with a group of my friends from Mississippi. We call ourselves the Mississippi June bugs. We're out celebrating the fiction of William Faulkner. We're trying to determine the difference between truth and fact, and we hope to meet some fine folks from the Boston community who are going to be here to join us tonight.
Faulkner wrote fiction, but in a sense, every story that we'll be talking about tonight is a true story. It's been said by one of my very good friends and colleagues, Senator Hob Bryan, who's also here tonight, that all Mr. Faulkner did was take good notes.
We met some fine folks from Massachusetts who helped us better understand what it means to be a Mississippian. Literary people, more or less.
A group of people from Mississippi contacted me, and I was a bit surprised and puzzled, and they summoned me to this Faulkner event because they read about my course. For years I've been sending students, Harvard students, to the Lars Anderson Bridge. Of course, I don't tell them that's where they're going, to find a plaque in honor of a man who never lived, who committed suicide.
And this effort that we're engaged in now is really in memory of the idea that Faulkner created, the person that is real and yet is not real, but it's about him, it's about that idea and not any plaque. The plaque is nice, it's been fun to go look for it, to talk about it, to read about it, but the primary function we have here tonight and in this occasion is the more serious one.
We presented our papers at a formal dinner at the Commander Hotel, where we pondered the meaning of life as Americans and as Southerners, and other matters.
Faulkner has said that he discovered, quote, his own little postage stamp of native soil was worth writing about, and that he would never live long enough to exhaust it. And yet his commitment to the landscape, culture, and community of his Mississippi locality does not confine his influence. His work reaches beyond the borders of state, region, and nation, connecting with people on a deeper level. Faulkner had the ability, in his own words from his Nobel Prize speech, to, quote, create out of the materials of the human spirit something which did not exist before. Using his voice, quote, not merely to be a record of man, but, quote, one of the props, the pillars, to help him endure and prevail.
What we hear eerily in The Sound and the Fury is not Quentin alone, but Macbeth and Hamlet too. Not Faulkner only, but Shakespeare. Faulkner's title, preparing for the echo in this passage of life as a walking shadow, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
His family relationships put the dis into dysfunctional families. A mother who was an unnurturing whiner, an ineffectual father, one brother who was mentally challenged, and another who was morally and materialistically challenged, and a sister who was, to say the least, a disappointment. For you see, he was an idealist, an image that Southern culture had given him of the honorable cavalier, a romantic figure who had cherished the hope of restoring his family's lost virtue. And that connects his story as well beyond family to the South.
I cannot help but think that the entire Compson and Gibson families would have been better off had they lived in 2019. Sure, Jason would likely be in federal prison, but Benji would have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and would certainly never have been castrated. Mr. Compson might have been sent to rehab. Good luck to them. Caddy, who aspired after roles reserved for men only in her day, would be a general instead of a cynosure. Dilsey, whom Faulkner humanized but patronized as a mammy savior, might be in 2019 a U.S. senator or even a federal judge.
There you go.
Certainly, no less a beneficiary of time travel to the present would be Quentin, who might have, with help from his peers, saved himself. There is a danger, I think, in romanticizing Quentin as the implosion of a Southern gentleman, rather than as a freshman suffering from depression and distorted thinking that associates with that.
Oxford, Mississippi, January 31st, 1941. Dear Will, I am not going to sign these checks any more than I ever signed the checks and notes you have filled out and sent to me in the past. Attached is my own check for 10. I will send more on the account when I can. I make no promises as to when that will be. I tried to explain to you about $1,600 additional 1937 income tax, which I was trying to pay 2 years after my Hollywood income had ceased, and when for 2 years my income had been reduced about 95%. But naturally, I did not expect you to listen to it much, since J.E. Nelson can't no more be interested in William Faulkner's hard luck stories than William Faulkner can be interested in J.E. Nelson's. But that's the situation. I am trying now to meet the last $853 payment, for which demand, also with threats, was made December 20th. So if I were going to give anyone a series of signed checks, I would give them to the grocers and fuel people who, in their kindness, have supplied myself and my dependents with food and heat during this time, and to whom I owe a lot more than even Estelle et al. Managed to get into you for. Man, that's a long paragraph. If this don't suit you, the only alternative I can think of is, in the old Miltonic phrase, sue and be damned. If you decide on that step, be assured that I shall do my best to see that the people who have fed me and my family will get protected, and after Uncle Sam gets through with his meat cutting, J.E. Nelson can have what is left. You may even get an autographed book. That will be worth a damn sight more than my autograph on a check dated 10 months from now. William Faulkner.
Tomorrow I will note, as I have for some years now, the anniversary of another prominent and tragic suicide, which has already been alluded to tonight. Another senseless loss, which, along with our subject here tonight, deserves consideration by students of Southern Gothic writing. For it was on the 3rd of June, another sleepy, dusty Delta day, that Billie Joe McAllister plunged to his death into the muddy water of the Tallahatchie River, leaving his community and one family in particular with agonizing questions.
After we had our dinner and refreshments, we headed for the Charles River to remember Quentin Compson and to read some of the Sound and the Fury and Absalom, Absalom. We threw flowers in the river in memory of Quentin Compson and others we have lost to suicide.
The trouble, the water, you know God gonna trouble the water.
We had come to Boston seeking knowledge. Who are we? Why are we here? Where are we going next? The homeland beckons. In 2020, we gathered in Money, Mississippi to remember the 3rd of June. But a pandemic hit us along the way. The June bugs adapted and found themselves at the Little Zion Missionary Baptist Church on Money Road in May of 2020. We came seeking culture. We found something even more meaningful.
Money Road is a paved road that is the extension of the boulevard in Greenwood over the Tallahatchie River. And it's 10 miles of paved road, and it's a little town of Money, Mississippi.
All the heart, all the pain, all the hopes from America can be found in Money Road. You start at Money, Mississippi with Emmett Till and the tragedy of his death, his kidnapping and being killed, the injustice of it all. You come toward Little Zion Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist Church, where we are right now. And as you come this way, you're coming down Money Road, you have the Tallahatchie Rivers curling and snaking in and out, closer and closer. And of course, the Tallahatchie Bridge is where Billie Joe McAllister jumped. And I think that song was informed by the Emmett Till tragedy. And when the song came out in 1967, we didn't know if she was white or black. But we heard the song, and it never says the word Mississippi, but everybody knew where it was because it had been just embedded in the consciousness of America. Tallahatchie County, Emmett Till, Tallahatchie River. So that gave a real power to her song. But as you come closer to this church, you have this graveyard over here of Robert Johnson, the father of the blues. One of his songs, he said, when I die, bury me down on Highway 49 so my old evil soul can catch that Greyhound bus and ride. Parallel to Monty Road, just across the Tallahatchie River, is Highway 49. As you're coming on any given day, you may hear a train coming down the tracks also, running parallel to Monty Road and the Tallahatchie River. And it's the city of New Orleans. Good morning, America, how are you? Do you remember Robert? Do you remember little Emmett? Do you remember Billie Joe? And where the tracks cross the road, if you were a pilgrim, just like Lot and Abraham, you come to a crossroads. You've got to make a decision. Will I stay in the Delta, the flatlands, or will I turn and go up into Carroll County, up on Choctaw Ridge, where Mama said nothing much of any good ever happens up on Choctaw Ridge?
Bobbie Gentry said that the bridge is in Money, Mississippi, which is about halfway between Glendora, where I was raised, and Greenwood. So I'm very familiar with that bridge. It's been there for a long time, and there are not many bridges that cross the Tallahatchie River from Greenwood to Glendora, and that would, I'm sure that is the one that she was referring to.
Okay, my name is Sylvester Hoover, and I'm a 100% Mississippi Delta. I was born here, I was raised here, and I was educated right here in the Mississippi Delta. I went to school at Money School in Money, Mississippi. I started school in 1963. First time I heard Ode to Billie Joe, it was in the 60s, but I'm not sure what year. It was a beautiful song. We loved it. We loved that Ode to Billie Joe song. We used to sing it. But, you know, we didn't know Bobbie Gentry. I mean, we didn't know no white people, you know, no more than the guy who owned the plantation, but we probably seen her, because see, if she went to Bankston School, we had to. I mean, because we too close to not see each other, but you know, we probably wouldn't have recognized her. And in the 60s, I couldn't look at a white female like I'm looking at you. I would have to look down. See, a lot of these females, these plantation owners that we lived on their plant, I don't know how your wife looked, because I never looked at her. I look at your shoes, but we couldn't look at a white female in the face or in the eyes.
When the mind meets the heart, it may make magic. Great artists capture a time and place and then take us somewhere else. Great art makes us more empathetic and perhaps a bit humble when we perceive genius revealed. Great art, like communion and cornbread, has its greatest purchase as a gift received. Roberta Lee Streeter, a good singer and a great writer, shed her Old South name of Roberta Lee and reintroduced herself as Bobbie Gentry when she refashioned her memories of the Tallahatchie River and the tragic death of a young man she probably never knew.
It started off with a date associated with it. You know, you can't beat that. It kind of catches your ear when you first hear it. And so I remember that particular date associated with it.
It has resonated with me for almost a little over 50 years. I was 15 when the song came out, And I was very young, 15, small, and I remember it was a little unsettling. And I've been informed how the musical structure of the song itself is meant to be a little unsettling. And then the whole mystery and the tenor and I can remember taking a typing class at Greenville High School after my 9th grade year, and this song came out. And it was hot in there, and somebody'd have a radio and you'd hear it, and you just understood it in your bones, being from this part of the world that she came from. But again, the discomforting quality of it, the mystery quality of it, was really part of the journey during which one loses one's sort of youthful innocence, if you will. It just began to suggest things were a little more complex than maybe one might think as a 10 or 12-year-old kid. And I just began to have a sense that things were not quite maybe as simple or meant to be as simple and happy as we might like to think they should be as a child. And so that was part of my experience in 1967 with it.
Well, I think that, it was a disruption song. The whole process of popular music is that there's some song that comes out that sounds like a new direction, something fresh, typically knitting together some different styles that in a way that hasn't been done before. And it breaks through when music has become somewhat formulaic. Not all the music people are making, but the actual what you hear on the radio and what makes it through gatekeepers. So it just didn't sound like anything else on the radio at the time. So it was super unique. And it's a mystery that engaged people. You had to really listen to the narrative, and all around the country, just even from reading contemporaneous coverage at the time, people were really intrigued by the mystery at the center of the song, which is, of course, what was thrown off the bridge, and why did Billie Joe McAllister jump off the Tallahatchie Bridge?
Ode to Billie Joe was #1 for 4 weeks. Reading a biography of Alex Chilton last month, I came to understand that what was happening then was the end of what they called the British invasion and getting back to more indigenous American sounds. So Ode to Billie Joe and what Bobbie Gentry was doing was leading the country back to things it would be seeing more of. You wouldn't have people like Joni Mitchell or Gordon Lightfoot or Buffy St. Marie, other people who were popular folk singers doing what they were doing without Ode to Billie Joe, Graham Parsons starting country rock, folk rock, things like the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and what they were doing with old country music standards and bluegrass standards wouldn't have happened without the shift that came from highly commercial American sounds or from the British sound.
So Ode to Billie Joe is a distinctly Southern piece of art, both in style and in the content. I mean, Bobbie, her catalog really, I see it that there's one really broad theme throughout her that pervades her catalog. And that's the theme of illusion, the theme of, what's behind what is being said, the theme of subtext. And that's really the foundation of her narrative writing about everything that has to do with the South. She would talk about, Bobbie Gentry grew up in Chickasaw County, and then also went to school in Greenwood. So between the two different areas of Mississippi before heading to California at 13 years old. And what really stuck with her was the way that the emphasis on Southern hospitality, on Southern manners could, while the goal of having manners and rituals like family supper is to create intimacy among a family or community, she was really fascinated about the ways that it could be, those rituals could be perverted really to actually enforce distance and create an impossibility of intimacy, even while it looks, you peer through the window and see a family having supper. It would appear to be an intimate family, but there they are at the table, and they're actually just miles and miles apart emotionally and psychologically from one another. And so there's that aspect that, the exploring the paradoxes of Southern life and culture is one of her main themes when she wasn't writing about a similar paradox in Hollywood of exploring illusions. And then also in the style of Southern Gothic, it just evokes that Jimmy Haskell strings especially, gives it this mysterious, ghostly, dark, haunting kind of vibe and scenario.
The greatest importance of Ode to Billie Joe is that it got people into a more narrative storytelling style of music and to a more American style of music. It was considered, before the word would have been used, a crossover hit, but in so doing, it captures a lot of things that are going on both in the culture and in music that are realized later. So I suspect that music experts, music historians, musicologists will give it a lot of importance.
And then she said, I got some news this morning from Choctaw Ridge.
And there's a hint of evil in the song when Mama talks about Choctaw Ridge.
Choctaw Ridge, my understanding that you can see Choctaw Ridge from the home that my daughter and son-in-law live in today, that Bobbie Gentry lived in at the time, from there. So that's all I can tell you. That's the story that has been told to me.
And we know there's a Choctaw Ridge here in Leflore County, although some of her formative earlier years were spent in Woodland, Mississippi, which is in Chickasaw County. But those were her early first 5 or 6 years. So she drew largely on her Southern influences, mostly from the Delta, as it shows up in her songs, her first 2 albums, one Ode to Billie Joe and the next one Delta Suite. And she just surrounds herself with enigma like that. And then, of course, Ode to Billie Joe, with all of its mystery involved and the way that the song kind of leads you through the thought process, is classic Southern Gothic.
So that song was always part of my kids growing up, and I always found it to be fascinating. I mean, there's Delta Dawn is a compelling song, Harper Valley PTA. Those are like the 3, I think, feminist empowerment songs from the 60s that deal with the South and the culture.
I'd like to meet Bobbie Gentry. I understand she's in Germantown. And by gosh, I looked up Harper Lee in Mooresville, Alabama one time, ran her down at the Hardee's at 9 o'clock one morning getting her a biscuit. And I'd been on that mission for about 3 years, so I may go look for Bobbie in Germantown or somewhere.
Bobbie Gentry took life's tragedies and banal experiences and made great art, fashioning her story out of the words and dreams, customs and habits, indeed the worldview of her working class tenant farmer background, black-eyed peas and cornbread, chopping cotton and baling hay, preachers and sawmills. She wedded the soul food and the tragic history and the blue music of rural blacks and whites to give voice to a time, a place, a people. By titling her work an ode, she gave fair notice of its enduring greatness.
We see the relationship to this story and to Billie Joe's suicide to the death of Emmett Till in Leflore County. That's putting the song in context. She was here in Greenwood when that happened, and it's bound to have made a profound impact on her. The song doesn't mention Emmett Till, anything about that, but if you look at that layer of history and superimpose it on Ode to Billie Joe, you see all sorts of profound, mysterious things going on. The term Southern Gothic has been used to describe the lyrics, drawing from Faulkner and other Mississippi writers. The Gothic is about a sense of mystery and anxiety and dread, and when you listen to the song, the sound of the music there's an anxiety there. The story is an anxious story. There's a troublesome thing has happened. Someone has committed suicide. And so it creates this jarring mood of the normal the everyday, and something really profound and mysterious, not only the story of Billie Joe, but bigger story of Mississippi.
Art is eternal. Life is brief. How do we value good art? William Faulkner's art, in his novella Tomorrow, captures the real agony Southerners feel when confronting the Emmett Till tragedy. Let us borrow a quote from William Faulkner. Somewhere in that debased and brutalized flesh which Bookright slew, there still remained, not the spirit maybe, but at least the memory of that little boy, that Jackson and Longstreet Fentry, even though the man the boy had become didn't know it, and only Fentry did. And you wouldn't have freed him either. Don't ever forget that. Never. Memories of other debased and brutalized flesh haunt Mississippi even today. Young Emmett Till lying in an open casket in Chicago. His brutal death in 1955 sparked the civil rights movement, which was in full force in Mississippi in 1967, giving the words Mississippi and Tallahatchie River a powerful resonance in the national consciousness. The Till memories, acknowledged or not, created a mood of foreboding, of unbearable pain, whenever these words were spoken in the national psyche, giving Bobbie's song an otherworldly power when we first heard the story of Billie Joe jumping off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
Well, there's no evidence that, no clear evidence that Bobbie was consciously thinking about the Emmett Till tragedy when she wrote Ode. I think it would be impossible for her to not understand that the resonance in choosing the Tallahatchie Bridge to as the focus of her song.
I'm glad to be here in the Little Zion Missionary Baptist Church, a wonderful setting. The grave of Robert Johnson, one of the most famous blues singers, is in the graveyard here. And religion is one of the most important aspects of Mississippi culture and Southern culture. And it's good that we can be here to celebrate that as well.
This church was built in 1871, and it was built by field hand laborers, unskilled laborers. And this church has been here 149 years, and it's still standing. And this church has been a big part of our community, big part of the community my whole entire life. This is the only church I ever been to. And when we used to come up here to church on Wednesday and Sunday, our houses looked like those Tallahatchie flats. And this church was white, it was beautiful, it was soft to us. It was the beautiful thing in our community. And it was a big part of our community, always been a big part of our community. If you are a black person or African American person and you're here in the Mississippi Delta, everything starts in the Baptist church. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's Robert Johnson, I don't care if it's civil rights, I don't care what it is. It starts in the Baptist church.
That's the kind of stock that we come from. Spread the word, brothers. Spread. Brothers and sisters, even then we were going through storm. Storm, Little Zion, this is not the first storm Little Zion has encountered. Little Zion has been here 150 years, and through the preachers, through the pastors, through the members dying, we're still rolling on. You want to know what storm we went through? I'm glad you asked. We went through so many storms. In fact, I wasn't even here, and the church was going through a storm. When you talking about preacher, there was right back here in the Tallahatchie River, there was a man named, a little boy named, 14-year-old boy named Emmett Till, who was drowned and lynched in this river. But we were still here. You went through Jim Crow. Segregation. There were times that sometimes the only thing black people could run for was their life.
And see, when when, you know, during Jim Crow time and all that time, your preacher of the church always is the yard boy for the boss man. If you the preacher of Little Zion Church, you didn't work in the cotton field with the rest of us. You worked around the boss man house. So the boss man gonna dictate the way the churches ran. When we was really young, you know, they wouldn't let us go into the juke joints because we was really young, and the little cat-a-corner thing they cut on the door, we could look through the door and see who was dancing because the music was booming, booming, booming. It was good music and everybody was around. And me and my brother, we would look through the door, but we couldn't see the person's face because we looking through this little hole. Or we could see these red shoes moving like this, you know, moving like this. I mean, just constantly, you know. And then we come to church on Sunday, we say, oh, that's who, yeah. And she doing the same thing on Sunday. Same thing on Sunday she did on Saturday night. The Delta is cotton. Cotton was gold. Cotton was king, it ruled. And seeing these people that own these plantations, they was, shoot, if you was a white person in the Mississippi Delta in 1967, you was like a king. You not do anything now. I grew up, I seen it with my own two eyes. I mean, all you have to do is get up. Everybody else gonna do your work for you, you know. And that's the way these people lived, and that's the way I live. And it has changed now, but it's still the same. I'm telling you. I see it, you know, because I lived it, this life. I said, man, you know, I was growing up, you know, I said, man, they're going to change in my lifetime. Not going to happen. And now I see it worse than I ever seen it. Now.
Those close to the tragedy know that Emmett Till was kidnapped in the Village of Money after supposedly insulting a white woman in Bryant's Grocery, a stone's throw from the same bridge where Billie Joe jumped. Bobbie set the tragedy on June the 3rd, another hot and dusty Delta day. June the 3rd was the old Confederate Memorial Day. It is Jefferson Davis's birthday. And those of us who are close to the tragedy, not just in place and time, but in other ways too, know that if you follow the winding Money Road, you are passing through some of the darkest shadows in the American soul. All the pain in our national psyche walks beside us as we wander along Money Road. We head south from Bryant's Grocery and note the railroad tracks on the east. The Tallahatchie River snakes in and out to our west, sometimes curling nearly to the road, then darting away into darkness. Fine cotton fields stretch for miles. They are owned by the Gentry. Images of field hands drawing heavy sacks up and down the long rows emerge. Hush, child! A plaintive wail cries in the breeze. What is it? It sounds so far away. We come to Little Zion Missionary Baptist Church. Pause and reflect. A little African-American graveyard is squeezed between the cotton fields and the banks of the Tallahatchie River, its congregation of old headstones staggering like drunks, pointing in all directions, names and dates scratched in rough cement, some broken, some completely fallen over. Sinkholes where unmarked slave graves have collapsed. Don't step in that hole. The wailing is getting louder. Near the bank of the Tallahatchie, we find the bluesman Robert Johnson's grave. His headstone reads, "I know that my Redeemer liveth." His people say he wrote those words shortly before he died. It is late afternoon. The wailing rushes past us, 15 cars and 15 restless riders. It is the city of New Orleans roaring down the tracks. Do any riders remember poor Robert, or Emmett, or Billie Joe?
Because you are his child, and he cares, God cares for you.
We are gathered here today to show our respect for and to celebrate the lives of several notable folk. This Mississippi Delta, described as the most southern place on earth, has produced a disproportionate share of Mississippi's and America's musicians, writers, athletes, and has been the location of many significant events. Let's be thankful for musician Robert Johnson, who is buried probably at Little Zion, right down the road. Johnson served as Eric Clapton's inspiration, his mentor. 35 years into his career, Eric Clapton said, "I'm now man enough to record Robert Johnson's music." He did his homage album called Me and Mr. Johnson. Emmett Till, we remember, as a 14-year-old black boy from Chicago, killed in that summer of 1955, his body dumped in this very river. His brutal death and Rosa Parks' refusal to move to the back of the bus are the two events that galvanized the civil rights movement in America. And as we know from recent events, that mission is not complete. We respect and celebrate the life of Bobbie Gentry, who attended North Greenwood Elementary School just a few miles down the road from where we stand. This pilgrimage today has given us all pause to reflect on these individuals and their contributions to our Southern culture. Amen.
Amen. It was a rough place and a rough time. A time when folks got killed because they had it coming. A place where souls were sold and souls were saved and souls transported. There was a young man named Robert who understood pain and wrote about it and sang about it and experienced his share by the riverside. One day he would be famous. He had a gift, or he was a quick study, or had he made a bargain. Some say he was a genius, the best that ever lived, proclaimed Clapton. The young musician was already in a churchyard grave when the invitation came from Carnegie Hall. Then there was a country store tended by another young married woman, a white woman. There was a teenage Negro boy from up north who had been warned by his mama about that tough place. At age 11, back in sweet home Chicago, he had stood up to a black bully. By 14, he was large for his age, too big for his britches, full of it, full of himself. Maybe he couldn't help himself. Maybe he couldn't imagine pure evil, pure hate. When two thugs tore him from his bed, they said Emmett had been asking for it. The two were put to trial before a jury of white men, but they all stood trial before a jury of millions and before the ultimate judge of all. The two exuded a cynical confidence that was justified by the 12, but not by the millions and not by the ages. Their names, Roy Bryant, J.W. Milam, were rightly hung in every hall of shame and degradation and infamy. Before long, even the local jury of public opinion did what the 12 could not bring themselves to do, finding outrage, meting out bankruptcy and ostracism. $4,000 from Look magazine was their 30 pieces. Who said a man couldn't sell his soul? With the midnight crossroads in their rearview mirror, they had to escape from that place. Roberta Lee was a fancy, raven-haired young woman who also once lived in this place. Her mama and daddy moved off, and for a while she lived with her grandparents in a house with no electricity and no running water. Bobbie Gentry understood the place and the time, and she put that understanding to music. The songs she wrote, like Faulkner's stories before, touch us in a special way because we recognize them. The first song she sang us was a mystery, one that has never been solved, about a teenage suicide after a strange incident on a bridge over Emmett Till's fateful river. We will never figure it out, though we'll keep trying. And then there's the other puzzle. After a while, the singer became a mystery herself, a worldwide star who just vanished. What do genteel, respectable people do about the mystery of that living legend who brings us together even now? We keep a candle lit in the window. We gather together on a bridge and throw flowers into the muddy water. We breathe a remembrance of those who died too young, of Robert and Emmett and all the Billie Joe McAllisters. We lift a thankful prayer that times and places are not as rough as they once were, and we press on.
There's something about like being from the South and being from Mississippi. It's in a lot of ways, it's like very tribal. Like you can attach your family to a specific place. Everybody knows everybody. It's very like sort of community based. So I feel like for people who are not from that, place, they're intrigued by it. It's sort of something new for them to sort of learn about and try to understand.
Mississippi is an incredible state. There's a lot of people in this state I'd like to choke maybe 3 times. There's some that can't get it, and I don't think ever will get it. But I do think that our people have come a long way. And I do think that my children, who are now between 35 and 43, got it. And they're loving this state, and they're appreciating this state, and I've got a lot of faith in the generation coming along. I just wish the millennials would learn to answer their damn phone when it rings. That's the only problem I got.
I am a very optimistic person. I look at that glass and I just can't help but to see it as half full, irrespective that others sees it as half empty. I've always thought that Mississippi was in a position to lead the world. Whereas we are all but forced to live together, particularly in terms of the racial aspects of things. And we can teach the rest of the world how to do that. It means that in the process, we're going to have to go through some rough times. In the process, it's going to seem as if we're just going in the wrong direction. In the process, it's going to seem as if we want to throw our hands up. But I am very optimistic about the future for the state. Least I would have never returned. Least I would leave the state or would already have left the state. But this is my state. I'm going to claim my portion of it, and I want others to have their portion as well. And it's my hope that we lead the nation in my generation. I'm sure that my forefathers thought the same. And I'm raising my children so that would happen for them as well. And it would be naive and just absolutely wrong for me to say that we as a state hadn't come a long way. And because we made that progress, I know that we can make other progress as well. And I tell you, it might not be so, but I feel like I know the people of Mississippi. I feel as if since I'm born here that something was sprinkled on me when I was born. Something was sprinkled on the other Mississippians when they were born. And because of that we're going to mature, to the point, whereas we're going to reverse from being number 50, number 49th in anything. I mean, I just have to believe that, and I just believe it from the bottom of my heart, even in her darkest days, even when the turmoil is so great as to see her almost destroy herself. I'm still going to believe in the state, and it's just a matter of time.
I stepped in the water was cold. God's gonna trouble the water. It chilled this old body, but it didn't harm my soul. God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade in the water.
Good morning, America. How are you? Art is married to reality in Mississippi, as thick as heat and humidity. How do you separate one from the other in this magical state? A land of story follows where the truth is greater than the facts. The city of New Orleans still rolls through Money, Mississippi, but it doesn't stop there anymore. But if you happen to be on that train with the sons of Pullman porters and the sons of engineers and mothers with babes asleep as it rolls through Money, Mississippi, in this land of words and water, and you see a scarlet pope and his flock waving, please remember young Robert, who created his own immortality with his words and guitar. And say a prayer for young Emmett Till, who was lynched and cast into these waters. And remember a young girl named Roberta Lee, who created her own world with words and a guitar and water. And ponder the very real worlds of Billie Joe McAllister and Quentin Compson as you, dear friends, roll on down to the sea.
We're here today to remember Billie Joe McAllister, a great Mississippian and a distinguished American. Billie Joe McAllister's body was recently retrieved from the muddy waters near Tallahatchie Bridge, where he was last seen on the 3rd of June, 1966.
We acknowledge the river you carved in delta dirt that flows near us, with its muddy waters and swift current. The river that entombed our dearly beloved Billie Joe McAllister for lo these 55 years, in desolate wetness and in numbing chill.
We remember first Billie Joe McAllister and his family, for his creator, Bobbie Gentry, for those who remembered with him, his mama, his papa, Brother Taylor, Becky Thompson, his nephews, and his beloved, and Becky Thompson. Lord, hear our prayer.
55 years ago, the date of an apparent suicide.
jumping off the Tallahatchie River Bridge. Many have no doubt of Billie Joe McAllister's sins and or his failures. So at this time in this place, 55 years posthumously, I remember who I am. I exercise the power vested in me to grant, convey, transfer, bestow, assign, and publicly pronounce a special dispensation to Billie Joe McAllister, thereby clearing his name and restoring whatever dignity he may have had.
Okay.